Have you ever faced a challenge so overwhelming that doubt and insecurity started to creep in? What if, instead of focusing on your fears, you could rely fully on God's strength, just like David did when he faced Goliath? David's story isn't just a tale of bravery. It's a powerful example of what happens when we surrender to God's plans, even in the most uncertain moments. Today, we'll explore how David's unshakable faith allowed him to overcome impossible odds and why his trust in God is a lesson we can apply to our own lives. If you're ready to strengthen your own faith and let go of insecurities, join us as we uncover how true victory begins with trusting in God. Before David became the warrior who defeated Goliath, he was simply a shepherd, the youngest son in his family, often overlooked and uncelebrated. As the youngest, David's responsibilities were far from glamorous. His days were spent tending sheep in the fields, a quiet life with little recognition. Yet, in those fields, David developed a unique relationship with God. His solitude allowed him to meditate, sing psalms, and nurture a faith that would later prove unbreakable. Unlike his brothers, who were soldiers in Israel's army, David's strength was rooted not in physical prowess, but in spiritual resilience. When Israel faced Goliath, the challenge was unprecedented. Goliath was a giant warrior from the Philistine army, standing over 9 feet tall and covered in armor. Day after day, he taunted Israel's army, daring any man to step forward and fight him. But no one dared, not even King Saul himself. Goliath's very presence paralyzed the Israelite soldiers with fear. His strength was unmatched, his experience intimidating, and his confidence seemingly unshakable. To everyone there, the outcome of a battle with Goliath seemed inevitable. Who could possibly stand against such a formidable opponent? When David arrived at the battlefield to bring food to his brothers, he was shocked to find Israel's army trembling before Goliath. For David, this was not just a matter of military might, it was a matter of faith. He couldn't understand why God's people were allowing themselves to be humiliated by a Philistine who defied the living God. In that moment, David's perspective set him apart. While the soldiers saw an invincible giant, David saw an opportunity to honor God and demonstrate his power. He believed that with God's help, even the most daunting challenges could be overcome. Despite his youth and lack of experience, David's reaction was bold. He stepped forward and volunteered to fight Goliath, not with a sword or shield, but with a profound confidence in God. His brothers mocked him, and King Saul initially tried to dissuade him, but David's faith was resolute. When Saul offered him armor, David declined, explaining that he would go with only his sling, his stones, and his faith in God's deliverance. David's choice showed that he understood a fundamental truth. Victory doesn't come from human strength alone, but from God's power and presence. As David prepared to face Goliath, he embodied a powerful message that would echo through generations. Trusting in God overcomes fear. David's faith transformed what others saw as an impossible situation into an opportunity for God's glory to be revealed. For him, the battle was already won because he believed wholeheartedly that God was on his side. And with that unwavering faith, David moved forward, not as a young boy facing a giant, but as a servant of the Almighty, ready to prove that no obstacle is too great when one trusts fully in God. As David stood on the battlefield, he made a decision that would set the course for his life and inspire generations to come. He chose to trust fully in God rather than in his own strength. For David, this was more than just a battle against a giant. It was a defining moment of surrender and faith. He understood that, in the face of overwhelming odds, victory depended not on physical weapons, but on unwavering confidence in God's power. David's words before the battle reveal the depth of his trust. When Goliath mocked him, David boldly replied, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." 1 Samuel 17:45. This declaration was more than mere words. It was a powerful testimony of David's faith. Unlike others who cowered before Goliath's size and strength, David saw this as an opportunity to honor God. He believed that by surrendering the outcome to God, he would gain a victory that was not his own, but one that glorified the Almighty. What sets David apart is that his faith wasn't based on his own capabilities. As a shepherd, he had no formal training in combat and no impressive weaponry. All he carried were 5 smooth stones and a sling. To others, it may have seemed foolish, even naive, to face a giant with such limited resources. But David's trust in God was so complete that he didn't question his preparedness. He believed that God would use what he had, no matter how humble, to achieve something extraordinary. In choosing to fight without armor or a sword, David demonstrated that he trusted God to fill in every gap and overcome every limitation. David's decision to trust God fully is a lesson in surrender. Often we're tempted to rely on our own skills, connections, or resources to face challenges. But David's story reminds us that true faith means letting go of our need for control and placing everything, our fears, limitations, and hopes, into God's hands. This kind of surrender isn't passive. It's an active choice to trust in God's wisdom and timing, even when we can't see how things will work out. David's faith teaches us that by surrendering, we are actually gaining access to a strength that goes far beyond our own. This level of trust can be challenging. In moments of uncertainty, our first instinct is often to hold tighter to what we know, clinging to our own understanding. David's story, however, flips this logic. He teaches us that the first step to victory is acknowledging our dependence on God. By doing so, we invite His power into our lives in ways we could never achieve on our own. David's choice to trust in God, despite the odds, demonstrates that faith is not just a feeling, but a commitment to believe in God's promises, even when our circumstances don't make sense. For David, trusting God was not a last-minute decision made out of desperation. It was a way of life that he cultivated long before he faced Goliath. As a young shepherd, he had faced lions and bears while protecting his flock, and in each instance he learned to rely on God's help. These smaller moments of faith built a foundation that gave him confidence when he faced the giant. David's history of trusting God in the ordinary prepared him for extraordinary challenges. His story encourages us to develop faith in our daily lives so that when the giants appear, we are already equipped with the trust we need. In the end, David's decision to surrender everything to God allowed him to step onto the battlefield with a courage that astonished everyone. His faith didn't eliminate the risk or the fear, but gave him the strength to act despite them. David's victory was not about his own bravery, but about his confidence in God's faithfulness. Through his complete trust, David shows us that true power comes not from our own hands, but from the one who guides them. This lesson of surrender and trust is one we can carry into our own lives, knowing that, like David, when we rely on God, we gain access to a strength far greater than anything we could imagine. As David walked onto the battlefield to face Goliath, he was surrounded by an atmosphere of doubt and fear. The Israelite soldiers watched anxiously, likely feeling a mix of dread and disbelief as they saw a young shepherd boy confront the most feared warrior of their time. Goliath was massive, intimidating, and heavily armed, while David had only a sling and 5 stones. But for David, this battle was about more than defeating a giant. It was about demonstrating that God's strength can overcome any obstacle. His courage was rooted not in his own abilities, but in his absolute trust in God, which allowed him to face his fear head-on. Fear is a natural response in the face of overwhelming challenges. The Israelites, who were experienced soldiers, felt powerless before Goliath. Day after day, Goliath taunted them, wearing down their confidence and amplifying their insecurities. Yet, David was different. He saw Goliath's threats not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as an opportunity to show the power of God. For David, the real battle was not between him and Goliath, but between God and the forces of fear that had paralyzed Israel. His courage came from knowing that God was on his side, making him unshaken in the face of what seemed like certain defeat. When Goliath saw David approaching, he was insulted and mocked him for coming to battle without armor or weapons. But David's response was filled with conviction. "You come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord Almighty." 1 Samuel 17:45. This statement reveals David's mindset. He wasn't relying on human strength or conventional tools of war. His true weapon was his faith in God. David's courage didn't mean he was unaware of the risks. It meant he was willing to move forward in faith despite them. This kind of courage challenges us to face our own fears, not by ignoring them, but by trusting in a power greater than ourselves. As he ran toward Goliath, David didn't hesitate. He took one of the stones, placed it in his sling, and with a single precise shot, struck Goliath on the forehead. The giant fell to the ground, defeated in an instant. This moment serves as a powerful reminder that courage doesn't eliminate fear, but empowers us to act in spite of it. David's courage wasn't a fleeting feeling. It was an expression of his deep-rooted faith in God's presence and provision. His story teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward with trust in God's promises. David's triumph over Goliath is more than just a story of bravery. It's a lesson on the importance of confronting our fears with faith. In life, we all face giants, situations that seem too big to overcome, be they personal struggles, financial hardships, or health challenges. Like the Israelites, we might feel overwhelmed and powerless in the face of these giants. Yet David's example shows us that when we place our faith in God, we gain the courage to face even the most daunting challenges. His victory over Goliath is a testament to the power of faith-fueled courage, reminding us that we don't have to be fearless to be victorious. Another key aspect of David's courage was his willingness to go against the expectations of others. King Saul, along with David's own brothers, doubted his ability to succeed. They tried to arm him with conventional weapons and armor, assuming that he needed physical strength to defeat Goliath. But David chose to rely on the tools he knew, his sling and stones, and more importantly, on the strength of his faith. This choice reveals that courage often requires us to defy external expectations and trust in the path God has set before us. David teaches us that true courage involves staying true to who we are and embracing the unique ways God has prepared us for our battles. David's battle with Goliath also illustrates how courage can inspire others. When the Israelites saw David defeat Goliath, their fear melted away, and they found the strength to pursue and defeat the Philistine army. David's act of faith didn't just secure his own victory, it ignited hope and courage in those around him. This ripple effect demonstrates that when we step out in faith and confront our fears, we create a testimony that can inspire others to do the same. David's courage was contagious, transforming a fearful army into a force ready to claim victory. Ultimately, David's courage was rooted in a simple yet profound truth. He knew that God was with him. His fear of Goliath was overshadowed by his trust in God's presence. This same truth applies to us today. When we face our own giants, we can draw courage from the knowledge that we are not alone. God's presence empowers us to face challenges that would otherwise be paralyzing. David's story invites us to embrace this courage, moving forward with the confidence that just as God was with David on that battlefield, he is with us in every battle we face. David's victory over Goliath was not just a matter of courage. It was the result of a deliberate choice to trust God completely and act on that trust. While others saw Goliath as an insurmountable obstacle, David chose to see him through the eyes of faith. This choice to trust wasn't a passive decision, but an active step that involved preparation, movement, and a profound reliance on God. David didn't just believe that God could deliver him, he acted on that belief with a boldness that demonstrated his faith. What makes David's choice so powerful is that it wasn't motivated by personal gain or pride. He was driven by a desire to honor God and defend Israel against the Philistines. David's trust in God was so complete that he didn't rely on traditional tools of battle. He took only his sling, stones, and unwavering faith. This approach was not only unconventional, but risky. However, David's confidence was rooted in knowing that he wasn't fighting alone. He believed that by taking this step, he was inviting God to act through him. This decision to act on faith, rather than just speaking about it, exemplifies the essence of trust. David's choice to trust God is a reminder that faith is more than just an internal belief. It requires outward action. Faith isn't merely saying, "I trust in God." It's stepping forward, even when we can't see the outcome. For David, choosing to trust meant stepping onto the battlefield with only what he had and letting God do the rest. His story challenges us to consider where we can take similar steps in our lives, where we can trust God enough to move forward despite uncertainty, knowing that He will meet us there. One of the most significant aspects of David's choice to trust God was his willingness to reject the armor offered by King Saul. This armor symbolized the conventional ways of achieving victory. But David understood that his victory would not come from physical protection or military strength. It would come from God's hand. By rejecting the armor, David was choosing to rely entirely on God's protection rather than on human solutions. This act of faith is a powerful reminder that God often calls us to take paths that might seem risky or unconventional to others. David's choice wasn't made without thought or preparation. He had faced challenges before, protecting his sheep from lions and bears, and each time he relied on God for strength. These previous experiences prepared him to trust God in a bigger battle. This teaches us that the faith to face giants doesn't appear overnight. It grows through the smaller battles we encounter daily. By trusting God in the little things, David was equipped to trust Him with much larger challenges. Similarly, each small step of faith we take today builds our trust for the greater challenges ahead. In choosing to trust, David invites us to live a life of faith-fueled action. His story demonstrates that faith isn't just about waiting passively. It's about moving forward confidently, knowing that God is with us. When we face our own giants, we can choose to take that first step of faith, trusting that God will guide our path. David's example encourages us to move beyond fear and take hold of God's promises, not just in our minds, but through our actions. It's a choice we must make daily, deciding to step forward in faith and let God handle the outcome. David's victory over Goliath was not only a personal triumph, but a testament to the power of faith in God. This wasn't just a young shepherd defeating a seasoned warrior. It was a visible demonstration of what God can accomplish when someone trusts in Him fully. David's victory wasn't about his own strength or skill. It was a success that came from God alone, achieved through faith and reliance on divine power. The story reminds us that God can bring victory in our lives in ways that defy human logic and expectations. For David, this victory symbolized more than just the defeat of an enemy. It was an affirmation of his faith. From the moment he chose to step forward, David's confidence was placed entirely in God's ability to act. When Goliath fell, it wasn't just a win for David, but a declaration that faith in God has the power to overcome any challenge. David's triumph showed Israel that their strength lay not in their numbers or weapons, but in their trust in God's promises. His victory served as a reminder that when we face insurmountable obstacles, God can provide the breakthrough we need if we trust Him completely. David's victory also changed the mindset of the Israelite army. Before David's intervention, they were paralyzed by fear and unable to imagine a way out of their situation. But witnessing David's faith and God's intervention transformed them. They saw that the giant who seemed undefeatable could be brought down with a single stone. This shift from fear to faith inspired the Israelites to rally and chase down the Philistines, defeating them decisively. David's success was more than personal. It sparked courage in others and demonstrated the transformative impact one act of faith can have on an entire community. One powerful aspect of David's victory is how it redefined the concept of success. In the world's eyes, success often depends on strength, strategy, and resources, but David's story reveals that true success comes when we rely on God's strength rather than our own. David wasn't a trained soldier, nor did he have a traditional weapon. Yet his faith allowed him to accomplish something no other soldier dared to attempt. This redefinition of success shows us that God can work through our limitations and that real victory comes when we let go of control and trust in His guidance. David's success is also a reminder that God honors the faith of those who act in His name. When David stepped onto the battlefield, he declared his purpose clearly: to honor God. He didn't seek personal glory or recognition, but wanted to show that there was a God in Israel who would defend His people. This pure motivation was essential to his victory. David teaches us that when we pursue goals for God's glory rather than our own, we position ourselves for success that reflects God's power. His story calls us to examine our own motives, encouraging us to seek victories that glorify God rather than ourselves. For those who face their own giants, David's victory serves as a powerful example of hope and encouragement. It shows that no matter how great the challenge, God can bring success when we place our trust in Him. But this success requires us to release control, let go of our doubts, and step forward in faith. Like David, we must take action and believe that God can work in ways beyond what we can see or understand. His victory challenges us to look at the giants in our own lives not as impossible obstacles, but as opportunities for God's power to be displayed. David's story offers not just inspiration, but practical lessons on how to live a life of faith each day. His victory over Goliath was a defining moment, but the principles that guided him can be applied in our own lives, transforming the way we approach challenges and strengthening our relationship with God. Here are 3 key lessons from David's journey that can guide us in our daily walk with God. First, place your trust in God. First, David's confidence didn't come from self-assurance or personal strength. Before facing Goliath, David put his trust in God, affirming that his victory would come from God alone. He didn't rely on traditional armor or conventional wisdom. Instead, he stepped forward with the tools he knew: his sling, his stones, and most importantly, his faith. This act of trust teaches us that the first step in any challenge is to place our confidence in God, not in ourselves or our resources. In our own lives, it's easy to default to self-reliance or to look for human solutions before turning to God. But David's example reminds us that our true strength lies in surrendering to God first. Whether we're facing a career setback, a health crisis, or a personal conflict, beginning with prayer and trusting God to guide us invites His wisdom and peace into the situation. By making God our first response rather than our last resort, we strengthen our faith and open ourselves to His intervention in ways we may not anticipate. Second, remember God's purpose for your life. Throughout his journey, David maintained a clear understanding of his purpose. His battle with Goliath wasn't about personal gain, it was about defending God's honor and uplifting Israel. David's sense of purpose gave him the courage to move forward and strengthened his resolve when others doubted him. This focus on purpose over pride is a powerful lesson for anyone seeking to live a life of faith. When we face challenges, remembering God's purpose for our lives can give us the strength and motivation to persevere. Each of us is created with unique gifts and a distinct calling. When we align our actions with God's purpose, we find meaning and direction even in difficult times. For example, if we're facing a relationship struggle, we can remember that God calls us to love and forgive, guiding our actions in a way that reflects His will. By keeping God's purpose at the forefront, we anchor our lives in something greater than ourselves, which provides clarity and resilience no matter what challenges arise. Tired. Face your challenges with courage and faith. David's faith wasn't a passive belief, it was an active commitment that led him to take bold action. His trust in God gave him the courage to step onto the battlefield and face a seemingly unbeatable opponent. This teaches us that faith requires more than just words. It calls for action, especially when we're facing giants in our own lives. To apply this lesson, we must embrace a mindset of courage in our day-to-day struggles. This doesn't mean we won't feel fear or doubt, but it does mean we choose to act in faith despite those feelings. Perhaps we're facing an overwhelming project, a difficult conversation, or a major life transition. Rather than shrinking back, we can choose to face these giants with a faith-fueled courage, knowing that God is with us. Just as David trusted God to guide his steps, we can move forward with confidence that He will lead us, no matter how intimidating the path ahead may seem. Fourth, the value of preparation and trust in small things. David's journey to facing Goliath didn't start on the battlefield. It began in the fields where he tended sheep. There, David learned to rely on God while facing smaller challenges, like protecting his flock from lions and bears. These experiences prepared him to trust God in bigger battles. This teaches us the value of faithfulness in small things as a foundation for greater challenges. In our own lives, we often face small battles that prepare us for larger ones. These might be everyday acts of patience, kindness, or perseverance that seem insignificant but build our character and strengthen our trust in God. When we're faithful in these smaller moments, we develop the resilience and confidence needed for more significant challenges. By recognizing the value of these small victories, we see that each step is part of a greater journey of faith. Fifth, view each challenge as an opportunity for God's glory. David approached his battle with Goliath as an opportunity to honor God. Rather than focusing on his own fear or desire for victory, he aimed to bring glory to God through his actions. This perspective can transform the way we view challenges in our own lives. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, we can see them as opportunities for God's glory to be revealed through us. For instance, when we face a difficult season, we can pray for God's strength to endure, trusting that our response can be a testament to His faithfulness. Whether in our careers, relationships, or personal growth, every giant we face offers a chance to reflect God's character. By choosing to honor God in these moments, we find purpose in adversity and allow our lives to be a witness of His love and power. Incorporating these lessons from David's story equips us to live each day with faith, courage, and a deep trust in God's plan. Just as David's faith led him to victory, our daily choices to trust and act in faith bring us closer to God and strengthen our ability to face challenges. As we move forward, may we remember that God's presence empowers us to overcome our giants, big or small, and that with each step of faith, we grow closer to the victorious life He desires for us. In today's world, we all face giants of our own, challenges that seem insurmountable, doubts that creep in, and fears that threaten to paralyze us. But David's example encourages us to respond with a faith that moves us forward, trusting that God will guide our steps. Like David, we are invited to bring our stones, whatever humble abilities or resources we have, and let God use them for a purpose far greater than we could achieve on our own. As we wrap up, let's reflect on the key lessons David's journey offers. First, trust in God above all else. Second, embrace the unique purpose He has for each of us. And third, remember that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward in faith. When we choose to live this way, we open ourselves to victories that bring honor to God and transform our lives. If you feel inspired to strengthen your faith and live out these principles daily, consider diving deeper with our ebook, 30 Habits to Draw Closer to God. This resource is designed to help you cultivate habits that foster a closer relationship with God, providing practical steps to strengthen your faith and increase your trust in His guidance. Each habit is rooted in biblical wisdom and tailored to bring peace, clarity, and confidence into your life. Even in times of uncertainty, don't let life's giants hold you back from the spiritual growth and courage God has for you. Download 30 Habits to Draw Closer to God today and begin building a foundation of faith that will support you in every challenge you face. Just as David's faith carried him through impossible odds, these habits will help you rely on God's presence and power in your daily life. May David's story inspire you to trust boldly, act courageously, and live out a faith that truly transforms.